I took an uncontrollable situation and turned it into a distinct advantage. And that takes however much work and however much support one would think it takes, multiply it times 10 million.
Amid a global pandemic, economic upheaval, and social distancing restrictions, many in the restaurant industry have suffered almost irrevocably this year. But Jon Krinn, chef, marketer, and owner of the award-winning fine dining restaurant Clarity, based in the Washington D.C. area, took this time as an opportunity for innovation.
Why anyone can't do that. You just have to commit to yourself to embrace your weaknesses and make sure that you're not going to fake any skills. If you don't have a skill, you can't say that you have that skill. But you can go out there and learn that skill, but it takes a lot of work and you have to be committed long term.
Jon leveraged his growth mindset and decades of experience inside and outside his industry to prepare for change and embrace the challenges facing his business. So what can others learn from his success? Welcome to Strategic Momentum, the podcast with actionable tips, inspiring stories, and practical advice from progressive leaders on what it takes to break through business and career inertia and understand the business of work. I'm your host, Connie Steele. There's no denying that this year has been exceptionally hard for companies who have had to drastically change or even halt their operations due to COVID-19. For many, these challenges have culminated in the decline or even closure of their businesses for good. For Jon Krinn, this was the case in 2008 when the economic recession negatively impacted the livelihoods of many in the service industry. He was forced to shut down his restaurant and subsequently decided to make a change in his career path. But as an athlete and competitor at heart, he used the setback as a launchpad for learning and growth. Since then, he's rebuilt his restaurant career, having pivoted from the culinary industry to an 8-year stint at Booz Allen Hamilton as a marketing strategist, and then back to being a restaurateur. He's taken everything he's learned from that experience in the corporate world to help adapt his current restaurant business to the climate we are now in with COVID. Today, Jon is sharing what he did to control the uncontrollable, the pivots he made and skill sets he's learned along the way, as well as the value of creating a career mashup that can help you thrive amid adversity. And from where? Of course, from his buzzing and busier than ever restaurant. First, we'll hear about his career journey that's led to a one-of-a-kind resume in the restaurant industry.
Some of it is planned, some of it is circumstantial, and some, like all of us, our resumes are sometimes the best you can do with the given circumstances. And as long as you're always trying to elevate and increase your skills, then you'll end up somewhere good. So I got into cooking right after college at Emory when I was 22. The idea was that I always loved business and pre-med in college. And I wanted to own the product I sold. I mean, that was the key, is I love selling, but I wanted to sell my own product, whether it was going to be, make paper clips or cabinets or food or something like that. But in addition, I love social interaction, working hard, an 18-hour day, working on something you really love. I enjoy that. And I'm also very competitive, always was, love sports. So I wanted to think of my job as a sport and a competition that you wanted to win. So lo and behold, cooking fit right in. It's got the physical, it's got the passion, basically a new game every day, although you're building on your experiences. And so way back, I loved every part of it. It also gave me a chance to travel, learn from incredible people, and then move on. I worked in New York and France and D.C. and Singapore and Japan, and I worked for some absolutely amazing people along the way, and they all are part of your resume. But the goal was always to gain enough skill to do something on my own. But I know you can't fake skill, so you got to have a heck of a resume.
I understand that you even had the opportunity to work with Tom Colicchio or work under Tom Colicchio and and some other greats as well. Rocco Dispiritu.
Yeah. So for me, if go big or go home. So, I mean, I looked for the roughest, toughest, most difficult situation I could find, because for any given day or any given period of time, I want to learn the most, right? I'm going to be in a kitchen 15 hours, 6-7 days a week. I want to make sure it's worth it. So, right off the bat, I said, I just made a list of the most famous restaurants in the world that also had the reputation for being the toughest, whether it be Alain Ducasse or Gerard Pongo or Tom Colicchio, or some others that, you don't know their names, but trust me, they're brutal. And you just insert yourself in this situation. And the neat part of cooking is that, for example, medical school, you actually have to get in with a pretty heavy set of prerequisites. Whereas cooking is one of those, at least the cooking part of it is artisanal. And in an artisanal trade, if you knock on the door hard enough and eventually break it down, you'll get a job. You may not be paid, or you'll be paid very little, but you will gain entry. And that's all I ever wanted, to just gain entry. So whether, I had to sleep at a friend's house or, in a hostel in France or with 5 roommates in New York, I didn't care, because when I was at work, my time was being extremely well spent, and I was being trained, in a sense, using other people's money, right? I mean, if I made a mistake, it was my fault, but ultimately it wasn't my restaurant. So I said, use your time the best it possibly can. If I am not crying when I leave the restaurant at the end of the night, then I'm not working for the right person. And I did a lot of crying.
There's certainly one who's willing to push themselves to the edge. I don't think many people would be willing to put themselves necessarily in a situation like that and recognize the fact that this is all about building skills by learning from the best, and it's going to be tough.
That first part of your gaining your skill set, the actual, the producing, I guess what you'd call it, sort of production of that product and your skill to do so. So that would be the food. You're learning about food and wine, right, in your 20s, not having to deal with any other part of the business, right? So after you work for all these great people, and then eventually I said, you know what, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring to come back down to D.C. where I'm from, and actually lead a kitchen. So the word chef means lead a kitchen. You're actually not a chef until you do lead the kitchen. So when you're training, you're a cook, and when you lead the kitchen, you're a chef. So 2000, I thought I was ready, at least with that part. And you just never know all the stuff you don't know. There's stuff out there. Yeah, I'll learn it on the fly, this and that. I'm a pretty smart person. Not knowing you've entered a rabbit hole that's way deeper than you thought. So 2000, I competed for and won the opportunity to open 2941 in Falls Church. At that time, I was tasked with building the kitchen, which back in 2000, there weren't many opportunities to do that. So I chose to come down from New York after working for, all these are Despirito and Colicchio and Daniel Boulud and Jean-Georges Vongericht and all these guys. I said it's time, and I thought I was pretty good. So I opened that in 2000 and did very, very well, despite the fact that and this was my first experience with a world crisis, and that was 9/11. That was in 2001. So couldn't really wrap my head around it. I was about 33 years old, and just had been trained to be a cooking machine.
$29.41 was and still is one of the top fine dining restaurants in the Washington, D.C. area. And despite a trying time in the economy when Jon started, he and the restaurant thrived. Yet, as an entrepreneur at heart, Jon eventually was ready to move on to running his own establishment, but wasn't prepared for the economic downturn that would force him to rethink what skills and experiences he needed to be successful and persevere.
So I did that part. And luckily, somehow, as we all know, the economy somehow made it through 02, 03, 04, 05, 06, 07. And we were doing great. I was on top of the world. In 08, I said, I think I'm ready to own my own place, since I didn't own 2941. And I ventured out with a group of people who were nice enough to enable me with some big checks because they liked me and thought I knew what I was doing. And I went and said, I want to go to Tyson's Corner because I think that's a great location. And I'm going to conquer the world in Tyson's Corner. So I built a big, beautiful restaurant, really New York style, called Inox, named after all the metal that you see in a kitchen. And all the pots are all made out of inox. It's actually a French word, so it's pretty appropriate. Opened up, rave reviews, nice and busy, and then the recession hit. And I had over-leveraged, built too big, built in the wrong place, had actually a location that I thought was good, that actually, if I would have listened to people that actually knew what they were talking about, I would have found that was a very much of an island, isolated location that was pretty inaccessible, even though it was 2 doors down from the Ritz-Carlton. So everything I thought I was doing for the right reasons, my brain was not trained for the decisions I had to make. And I lost that restaurant in 2010 and lost a lot of money, mine and others, and was in a very, very difficult position at that point. So an emotional recovery was necessary, but also I needed a job. And so I decided that it wasn't the recession that closed the restaurant. It was the recession that, in a sense, I was lucky enough to be in the recession because it exposed so many weaknesses in my skill set. It's like when they talk about a basketball player and, he can shoot, but, someone he played against exposed his weaknesses as a defender. Well, the recession exposed about 100 weaknesses to my game. So I said, I'm either going to go to business school, which I don't think at my age and my situation, that would be the most prudent decision, or I'm going to get a job somewhere not in the restaurant business, in a company where I can learn skills that I don't have, because there are obviously a lot of skills I don't have, because the decisions I thought I was making for the right reason were not rewarded at all. And that was my fault. So I certainly embraced that situation, and I was able to get connections into Booz Allen Hamilton, strategic consulting company, as we all know. That was in 2010 as a marketing strategist, which I was very fortunate to gain entry into that company. And once you get in there, through a connection, you sink or swim. And being a quick learner with a purpose, that's for sure, not wanting to be stupid anymore, I thrived there. Long days, long nights, a lot of work, but man, I was thirsty for the knowledge and the way to work, to manage myself, to manage other people, to solve problems, to project plan, to work your way through issues like a trained business person rather than an artisanal cook.
How did your past experience as a chef and restaurateur help you succeed at Booz? You said that long days, long nights, but you loved it and you learned all these valuable skills. But how did, again, those skills that you had, how were they transferable? And how did you even realize some of those skills were transferable? Because most wouldn't see the natural connection.
Well, I think, first of all, I was lucky to get in the first place because a lot of Booz Allen people love food. So they like
it's power of networking, power of connections, right?
But when I started working there and I did things that came natural to me, I found that my superiors didn't see that those were natural things to everyone that currently worked in the company. For example, embracing a mistake without defensiveness. When you're in a kitchen and you screw up, you are told in no uncertain terms that you made a mistake and that can't happen again. And if you do anything but say, yes, chef, and fix it in about 3 seconds, then you're going to have a major problem in that business entity. So at Booz Allen, when I was learning new skill sets, but when I was called out, I embraced it. So that was certainly a skill that ingratiates yourself with your superiors, because they don't have to worry about telling you like it is. In fact, I wanted them to tell me like it is, tell me how it is, and because I knew that was going to improve me. So that was a skill that, lo and behold, it helped me navigate through situations. Another was the ability to deal with clients. You know, as a chef, you deal with a lot of happy people, but you also deal with some people that have issues with your product or your processes, and you have to deal with those in a very dignified manner. Whether you consider someone right, wrong, this, that, there's a way to deal with people in hospitality, and you have to have that inherently in you, because faking it doesn't work, just like faking skills doesn't work. And that also served me well at Booz Allen, and that gave me a lot of opportunities to learn. So I got that reputation really quick, and actually became that guy who a lot of project leads sent me in to deal with a client that was unhappy, to feel them out, hear them out, and see what solution set we could offer them. And many of the times back in the beginning, when I worked there, I didn't even know what the project was or how to solve it. But I did know how to listen to that client and let them get those feelings off their chest. And then I would offer them a timeline for a solution. And then they would be like, wow, that is really refreshing. And then I would go back to the team lead, and I said, well, I don't know what the heck this guy was talking about, but here's what he wants. And you have 48 hours, and I told them you could do it. So, and so they're like, great. They were happy for it, because they couldn't get an answer out of the client because he was so mad, right? So sifting your way and wading your way through those situations also helped. Eventually, I started leading teams. Even leading teams around the country in our strategic innovation group, going to conferences and projects around the country and around the world, leading as many as 125, 150 people in a given city. So I really thrived there, and they were giving me a lot more than I was giving them, and I always had that attitude, because they were just filling in gaps in my skill set every single day. So in 2014, I felt like I could venture back to where I belong with a restaurant, but as a different person, with a certainly more well-rounded. I found a nice little unassuming space in Vienna, which is certainly in the zone. Vienna is a center of gravity for Northern Virginia. I had a lot of parking, which was a priority for me. And I opened Clarity in the beginning of 2015, but I wasn't finished learning at Booz Allen. So as someone who likes challenges, I decided to go elevate a little bit more and ask my boss if I could go 100% virtual at Booz, keep my clients, and be the chef owner of Clarity, plus work full-time at Booz Allen. And I think she was so taken aback with the idiocy of the request that she said yes.
Who would do parallel pathing of two full-time jobs, right?
No, she's like, you didn't just say that. So as maybe just as a lark, like when you watch a reality TV show, she wanted to see if I could do it. And that was a challenge for me. But I did that for 3.5 years, and I did not resign from Booz Allen until September of 2018. So that was 3.5 years of double duty. I thought I had a tactical skill set, and I did before I went to Booz Allen, but in a very narrow-minded focus. It was very granular. I did not have big picture tactical capabilities, and I did not know how to stay ahead of the game. It was even the most organized I ever was. I was still flying by the seat of my pants, and I was sort of proud of it. Booz Allen was where they took maybe some raw skills and turned it into sort of advantageous capabilities. I mean, I have 80 people who need a paycheck every week here at Clarity. you better have some overarching skills. So I had a lot of raw materials, but Booz Allen was a total game changer as a chef. And really, if you look at it, I mean, it is the absolute most unique chef resume on planet Earth.
Jon's resume is quite a unique one, with his diversity of roles being a prime example of the career mashups we love to hear about in these pod courses. He was able to apply the hard and soft skills accrued from his depth of experience in the culinary world to his strategic marketing projects, where he thrived as an employee. And along the way, he developed and honed expertise in planning, time management, and leadership. He then took those business skills back into the kitchen, which has prepared him for running a restaurant business in a time where you have to be strategic, agile, and operationally dynamic to succeed. And so when COVID hit, Jon took what he learned from losing a business in the 2008 recession, coupled with the valuable skills and insights gained while at Booz Allen, and was ready to pivot. He shares how he used his business acumen to grow clarity over the last few years, and then how he was able to quickly defend his business against the most recent socioeconomic crash. How did all those learnings help you think about the opening of clarity? And what were the most important lessons you learned and why?
Well, I think the first one would be, it might be obvious for normal people, but for a chef, maybe not, is staying ahead. And there is, remember, from 6 a.m. until midnight, 7 days a week, we are involved here in the restaurant in execution of food and hospitality. So that's 18 hours a day. And from what I've heard, I think I Googled it, you're supposed to sleep at some point. So that doesn't leave a lot of time for planning. You can get in the weeds, as they say in the restaurant, very quickly, right? Because the entire day and night is involved in what's going on right this very second. You have nothing left over from yesterday, right? So that does not a successful business make. So you have to have the skills to run in parallel swim lanes, even though, and this is the important part, most businesses have, okay, so in a restaurant, you need to execute food, you need to execute wine and liquor and hospitality and service and scheduling, but you also have to do planning and marketing. And there's a whole physical plant, right? Because it's sort of like you're on a submarine. There's stuff broken all the time, right? You have to do strategic analysis. You have to have marketing strategy. All the things I just mentioned that a business has, that's one person in a restaurant, because the income is not such that you can have teams of people working in parallel swim lanes at the same time, right? So it's very easy to not provide your guests with what they need, which is a heads up. I mean, if you want to do a dinner, say a special dinner that will bring in money, right? That's a high cost dinner. You can't bring that to your clientele 2 days ahead, right? People don't work like that. They plan, right? So somehow, some way, and this is just one aspect of it, you have to be 4 or 5 months ahead. Well, that takes a serious amount of skills when there's already 18 hours a day of just operations, right? So that is what I learned at Booz Allen, right? I mean, you have a project plan, right? And you have to stick to that project plan. And although you can't just play whack-a-mole with the issues of today, you have to be able to follow the project plan. There has to be consequences to not following that plan because of something that's going to reap benefits in 6 months from now. That's a very hard thing to do in a restaurant. But that is a skill that I learned, and it really turns into the ability to create solid business for the long term. So that's just one of the skills that I learned.
And, so if we talk about all those skills that you have learned and now applying them in this interesting environment we're in now with COVID, I mean, certainly COVID has had a devastating impact on the restaurant industry. And we've seen favorite places go out of business or others trying to survive. And for those trying to stay in business, I know they're looking for new business models while trying to figure out how to adapt to a different way of doing things. And You specifically have been incredibly successful at being able to pivot, thrive during these challenging times, such that you're doing better than ever before. So how did you approach managing a restaurant business differently that enabled you to create this incredible traction?
Well, yeah, I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate to have a great team, obviously, but I'm like we're talking about, I'm fortunate to have, as they say in the movies, a specific set of skills that really now enable me to correctly implement strategies that I wasn't able to implement in 2010 during a recession. Right? It's a big difference. I guess the way I can describe it is in business you have controllable and you have uncontrollable. Ultimately, you'd want to be able to control everything in your business, but you can't, right? So the pandemic was an uncontrollable situation, right? Just like weather's an uncontrollable situation. So the pandemic was uncontrollable. As soon as we were shut down on March 14th, my first thought was, how fast can I turn an uncontrollable situation, which is right now 100% uncontrollable, they shut us down and we have a pandemic, into controllable situation where I can bring in income and align it with my clientele who is already supportive pre-pandemic, okay? And the time span between the uncontrollable and that pivot to controllable, that means that's the make or break of my business. So the faster you can turn an uncontrollable situation into a percentage of controllable, that gap, the smaller that gap is, the more chance you have to succeed and thrive. And so it's exactly what I thought on March 15th. So what I do is, look, we all chefs want to have 5 restaurants because that means we're cool. But I actually like to have 5 restaurants but only sign 1 lease. So what that means is diversification. And I've always done that. I like to have different ideas and do different things under one roof. So...
But I understand diversification isn't necessarily the norm in most restaurants. And if, in fact, it's actually a no-no, as I've learned from you.
Correct. So normally it would, and this is what the media thought also, and some customers, right? I mean, you go to a place and it's tasting menu only, that's a very focused restaurant. You go to a place that's, has a huge menu and you can order 100 things, that's also very focused. Two different focus, but they don't mix, right? You don't go to Cheesecake Factory and see a tasting menu, and you don't go to, Pineapple and Pearls and see 20 different ways to get chicken, right? So they're both focused, but they're alternatively focused, right? So my idea was always to actually diversify like a stock portfolio, right? You're one person with one stock portfolio, but it's diversified, and some things are doing well, they're high performers, low performers, medium. We all know what that means, right? And that's what they say, to have a diversified portfolio. So why can't a restaurant have it? So that's what I started doing a while ago at Clarity. So I'd have wine dinners, and I introduced bourbon onto the tasting menu, which no one's ever done because I like bourbon, and it goes with food. So I introduced that. That seemed obvious to me, not obvious to others. It was always termed as brand confusion if you diversified under one roof, but I wanted to push it through and prove to customers and to media that you can do it, and it actually spells success. And we've become so busy at Clarity pre-pandemic that you could really look at it as a diversified stock portfolio. So you're doing some of this, some of that, some of that. 100% means, it can mean 99 different things at 1%, or it can mean one thing at 100%, or anything in between. So I sort of like maybe 5 things at 20%, it sort of goes up and down, right? It's still 100%. Sometimes it actually adds up to 125%. Okay. So that's what I did. Now, when the pandemic hit, my strategy became even more applicable. And because of the skills that I had gained over the last 10 years, this is not the cooking skills I was using. This is the business skills. And we've described why I had those skills. The best thing you can do is learn skills to apply to your own business outside of your own business. because it's a completely different perspective. And what you find out is that all businesses are the same across the different landscapes, but we apply, the products are different. And most of the time people think, well, if it's a different product, then you're in a totally different business. Well, if I wear a chef coat and you wear a sport jacket or a business suit, we're totally different businesses, and we're not. And that's why sort of my book that I'll write one day is going to be called We All Serve Somebody. Because we do, we all serve somebody. If you have a client and you serve, you serve food or you're selling satellites, it is still based on relationships and trust and coming up with the goods in a time frame that is executed as planned. And you need to have a diversified portfolio. I mean, BMW doesn't just sell one car; they sell all sorts of cars. Even Rolls-Royce has a bunch of different levels, right? So these are companies that you think could exist on one product, but they don't. So if you look across markets to really see what other people do, I think you can find some secrets to your own business. But you can't guess. It's better to work in the business to see what they do and then apply them to your own business. Exactly what I was doing. So I said, look, if you have 100% of my business that was shut down on March 14th, I don't want 100% of that very business back. I want to create a new business on March 15th. I need to get that 100% business, but it has nothing to do with the business I was doing before. If I have to do 10 different products that get 10% each, or 20 different products that have 5% each, I'm going to get back up to 100% as fast as I can, being controllable, right?
And that's contrary to the way that pretty much anybody else operates in the restaurant business, as I've learned from you.
Because the natural reaction is, I just lost my business. I'm stuck. What am I going to do? I don't ask, what am I going to do as in that way that you're asking, what am I going to do? I literally am saying, okay, what am I going to do tomorrow? Because I better have 20 ideas tomorrow, right? Not what am I going to do? Woe is me, or woe is the industry. That is not closing that gap between uncontrollable and controllable. If it doesn't fit that model of pivoting uncontrollable to controllable, that don't put it in your brain.
And right? I know the key thing that you had mentioned when we had conversations, that it was all about experimentation too. You had these ideas. You wanted to get to market quickly, and it was starting small, testing, learning, seeing what worked, and continually evolving that and applying those different ideas where you knew you could get traction. And that's a very innovative thing to do in this space.
Well, I think the fastest way to traction in that exact time, March 15th, what was the answer? The answer is, when the product you put out, you want people to be familiar with it. This is not the time to experiment with dehydration of truffles, right? This is a chance to say, I want 10 different kinds of comfort food. I'm going to put them out there on a takeout website, and it's going to happen tomorrow. And I'm going to figure out a way to make it, right? So that's, barbecue, big sandwiches, pizza, things that immediately you could put out a product the next day that people would connect with, right? Now, am I the greatest pizza maker in the world? No, but do I have people that want to support me? Because right then, people were ready to get takeout. If their favorite restaurants put something out, they were going to buy it, right?
And you knew your audience. Those are things that you learned at Booz. You clearly understood
correct.
Who is your target audience. What are they going through right now? What is it that they would be likely to buy? How can I turn that around quickly?
It's called alignment. I mean, you had about 6 hours to figure it out. And the next day I came out with a to-go website that had about 20 things on it. And we scrambled to make it, and people were buying it. It's, look, we all know it. It's called first mover, right? You got to be a first mover, right? And keep things top of mind. Right. And that's what I did. And then once we had that base, that first week, I was able to start, experimenting with other things. So that the takeout went very well. And then when they moved to phase, 3 and let us attack our parking lots, I had already had a plan to open the parking lot in a certain way. So what did I do? I knew people had been sitting in their house for 3 months, right? This was say March, April, May, June, right? End of June. I knew people that hadn't been going out. What do you want to do when you've been stuck in the house all the time? Celebrate. Okay, how do I align that? I opened a tasting menu only restaurant in the parking lot. Super focused, no more takeout, no more pizza. And I'm going to go completely the other way and turn it on its head and open a fine dining, oxymoronic pivot, but in a parking lot to tasting menu only to align with what people actually want to do, which was celebrate, right? And they did. And that restaurant, that takeout only restaurant was booked all of July and all of August by the time I opened, right? So I pretty skillfully aligned exactly what people wanted. If I had opened up the parking lot with takeout, with pizza and pupusas and fried chicken and things I was doing, I literally might not have saved the business because the amount of money I would have been able to bring in, I was losing opportunity. But because I pivoted all the way to a celebratory type of concept for a limited time, I was actually able to bring in the maximum amount of money and align with what people wanted to spend. Once I felt that aperture had to be opened, right at that time when people wanted to support but couldn't keep going out for tasting menu only, I opened up the aperture wide. I brought in the barbecue. That's a concept that people know and love. I brought in oyster bar. That's a concept people know and love. I opened a cigar lounge, which is actually just tables off to the side so they wouldn't gross people out. I opened a cigar lounge. That's another concept people know. Right? All those, the three concepts I just mentioned are all restaurants that are actually sometimes standalone restaurants, right? You go to an oyster bar, a cigar lounge, and a barbecue place. Well, I did that all under one roof or in one parking lot. So that was opening plus I did, I got an Argentinian grill. So a grill restaurant. So that's another one. And my regular cart and tasting menu. So that was 6 restaurants in one concept. And that's called diversification. So now what that did was align with what everybody wanted, right? So 10% here, 15% here, 25% here, 30% here, actually added up to, in the last 2 months, about 125% income.
By diversifying the way that he did, Jon expanded his reach exponentially, garnered greater interest, and tapped into the loyalty he had already gained from existing customers to maintain momentum while other restaurants were failing. The key was understanding his customers inside and out, which is a core business tenet regardless of an industry. And trends have shown that consumers are not solely focused on the product, but rather it's the experience around the product that people are drawn to. So knowing that his audience wanted an experience, not just a meal, and given the spatial limitation dictated by the virus restrictions, Jon used this time to get creative, keeping his customers and the relationships he's formed with them at the heart of everything he did. So your example of the tasting menu outside, and I'd love for you to tell a little bit more about that boat slip idea that you had really demonstrates something that's incredibly innovative, very out of the box, and demonstrates for people that you really think of this holistic dining experience versus just focusing on the food only.
I remember at Booz Allen that we'd be sitting, and I was a marketing strategist, right? So
right.
I've always been a relationship strategist because the relationships and trust are the cornerstone of business. But as a marketing strategist at Booz Allen, I would sit in on meetings after we had finished a project, and we said, okay, now we got to, in a sense, put this in a presentation. And I'm like, seriously, like, why does this matter? We did it. Let's just sell it. And and through a lot of meetings that made a lot of sense, I was like, oh, packaging matters. Packaging really matters, whether you're selling satellites or food. And we were selling satellites. So lo and behold, packaging a satellite matters too. So I really gained an understanding that when you're offering a concept, you also have to package that concept. So when I opened a tasting menu restaurant in the parking lot and called it A Lot of Clarity, that's in parking lot, I said, you know what? I got to package this. I can't just sit people in a parking lot just because they're happy to be out, right? So what did I do? You're talking about a value proposition. Every business, every part of a business, every offering of a business has a value proposition, or Tiffany's wouldn't put a box in a box in a bag and make it blue. And, so you say, hey, the little blue bag that you identify with. I mean, it's genius, right? So I said, how can I do this? So I said, let's take the parking spaces and use every alternated parking space I would use as what I call the boat slip, because a boat slip is sort of high end. You're talking about tasting menus versus go in your parking spot. So I market it as your own boat slip. So why is that important? Because people understand that when you go to a boat and you're in your boat slip, that's your campsite, right? No one can go in there. And people were looking for that kind of safety and obviously the social distancing. So I had a parking space that was 20, let's call it 20 by 15, and it's delineated with paint. And if you go in the next parking spot, that's 10 feet, and you skip that spot and you go in the alternated parking spot, you have an automatic social distancing of 10 feet on either side of your boat slip. So that made people very comfortable. And then what you want to do is package up that little boat slip / campsite with some interesting variations. So what I did was say, okay, let's combine tasting menus with tailgating and being on a boat. And how I did that? I said, okay, your table is in the parking spot next to the curb. I put a tent over the table, and then I'm going to ask you to park your car in the parking spot also. So the car is like your boat, and the table is like you're eating off the back of the boat, and you have a tent is like your umbrella on the back of the boat. And people absolutely loved it. And I added to it that since you can't get babysitting, right, because, no one would, you couldn't get someone coming into your home to babysit at that time, I said, bring your kids, go get them whatever they want to eat somewhere else, fast food or pizza, pull your car up, back it in, open up the SUV, make a kid cave in the back of the SUV, and have the kids with their devices and their food sitting next to you on a date night. And I just solved an incredible problem, which was childcare to actually get out of the house.
That's brilliant.
And that actually, so that not only the taste menu take off, that format and that packaging, but when I brought the kid situation in there, I solved a problem that so many people were having at that time. You can't eat out if you're leaving the kids at home. You could not get childcare. And that was actually my favorite idea of the whole thing. And there were pictures and videos and media and social media postings about that very idea. And that was just marketing and packaging and solving a need. I mean, you always have to solve a problem, right?
Absolutely.
That's what they did. So that's that tasting menu restaurant, a lot of clarity garnered. And it was also a first mover situation and also bucking the trend of compressing your offerings. And I actually expanded the offerings. And on top of that, you were going high end when everyone else was going low end or no end. And it garnered a lot of media attention, which also brought in a lot of clientele.
Right. And you're constantly rotating things out and changing it up all the time. So I think what's so amazing is that people now see all this success, but you had, that difficult period of failure at Inox. And I know that you've mentioned that it was so valuable in learning from that failure. And it's about failing forward, as I know you like to call it. So, what insight do you have for people in terms of being able to learn from failure? Because it's something that many people want to still try to avoid, but it's probably really important to actually up-level your skills.
Well, I think, you look at someone who excels at sports and you think they were just gifted. And then you have a camera follow them through their life and you're like, oh my God, the guy works out like 16 hours a day. So you really want to know someone's backstory. Frank, one of my favorite sayings is that I carry around with me is that Frank Sinatra said it took me my whole life to become an overnight success. And I thought when I heard it years ago, I said, that's such an incredible line, because when you're out there doing your thing, no one thinks or cares, about your history. But if you dive into it, deep dive, as they say, you will find anyone who's successful, it was not given to them. And they had to, like they say, get up one more time than you're knocked down. And all these sayings are easy to say, but not everyone can do it. So you cannot quit. If you quit, then you can't use your lessons that you learn. And actually, I wouldn't even hire someone that has a resume that hasn't seen failure, because I don't think they have any perspective. So I say now that thank God for the recession, which is like the weirdest thing for someone to say. But I turned it into that. I made that situation.
Right.
I took an uncontrollable situation and turned it into a distinct advantage. And that takes however much work and however much support one would think it takes, multiply it times 10 million. But there's no reason why anyone can't do that. You just have to commit to yourself to embrace your weaknesses and make sure that you're not going to fake any skills. If you don't have a skill, you can't say that you have that skill. But you can go out there and learn that skill, but it takes a lot of work, and you have to be committed long term.
Failure is something we've talked about again and again in our pod courses because it's an inevitable part of the journey to success. While many of us still fear failure, shying away from a challenge for the sake of avoiding failure is a clear disadvantage when it comes to personal and professional development. Failure is where we find growth. That's why, as Jon said, facing the 2008 recession was the best thing for his business today. He learned how to plan his next business strategically and proactively, prepare for change, and adjust and adapt on the fly. And part of that plan was experimentation, which many business owners may not be comfortable with. So how did Jon set up an environment where it was safe to test and learn?
When I went to open Clarity, my first priority was parking. Why was that my first priority? Because I call it breaking down and minimizing the barriers to entry. So when someone's sitting at home and you're not even in like the city, so you're like, well, of course there's parking around the suburbs, but there's actually not that much parking. So why would you open a restaurant that has say 80 seats and you have to do 160 people, and that's, let's just call it 40 cars on a given night, and you have 8 parking spaces? It's just not going to, well, it's just silly, right? You're creating a barrier to entry for 32 of those cars, which you actually need to stay in business, right? So parking is a thing. It's a big thing, right? So parking was the priority because I know it's the first barrier to entry to going out, right? So in the same way, when I put out a product, it's not that I don't experiment in the restaurant every day, but when the pandemic hit, alignment and minimizing the barriers to entry and keeping things top of mind that people feel as, in a sense, comfort food was a priority, because anything else would have put up a barrier to entry. Maybe a small one, maybe a big one. It's not for me to determine, but I don't want any, right? So you use recognizable products that you try to do well. All right. Was my barbecue in April like Franklin's barbecue in Austin? No. I mean, it's gotten better since then. I knew that there was no barrier to entry to someone who wanted to support Clarity and support my endeavor. If I put up a barrier in entry, that would just been a bad move. So alignment was key. So there was no advantage to experimenting at that time without a base set of products that had zero barrier to entry, right? Now, another product that I did once I had a good takeout business going because of what I just described was I did some funny little experiments. Like I had some of the ladies here make pupusas because everybody's heard of them. You can't really get them, but you'll try them. if you see them. And why is John doing it at Clarity? Well, hey, let's check it out. But you know what I did? I put black truffle on top of it. Now, no one's ever done that. Pupusas and black truffle just don't. It's just crazy. You know what I mean? But you know what? Instead of that being a barrier to entry, it created excitement because I already had aligned all the other products without barriers to entry. You see what I'm saying? So once you have it, then you can pop off here, pop off there with experiments, right? But that idea was, and that's part of what I love is relationships are just the key to business. Relationships lead to trust. I come around, I cook, and then I walk around and I make sure I get to know every single person that comes to this restaurant. I tell the staff, and I've told it the same line for 5.5 years. They can repeat it easily. I said, look, guys, I got a feeling that 50%, if you even look on the reservation sheet, tonight, 50% of the people that are coming in here have been here before, and 50%, it's their first time and we don't know them. If we make sure by the end of this night that we know 100% of the people that came in here, we're going to build a heck of a business. And I say that every single night at pre-shift, right? Because that's how you build on it, right? And so on and so on and so on. So relationships are key, and you can't make relationships without understanding the minimization process to minimizing barrier to entries and the process of creating trust through relationships. If you can do that, you can do anything.
Just like his ability to learn, grow, and adapt, Jon's skills in relationship management have been one of the key components to his success. Now in the pandemic, the investment made in building those relationships have effectively helped him sustain his restaurant and, more importantly, his brand's reputation. So now, Jon offers his thoughts and advice to other business owners facing similar challenges in these unprecedented times and struggling to rethink their approach.
What do you do instinctively? Now, when an uncontrollable situation is upon you, you may instinctively say, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm stuck. If your brain works like that, at that point in time in your life, it just means you don't have those skills at the time, right? So either talk to someone who has those skills and can give you a perspective and some advice, some strategic advice, right? Which is probably actually what people should do. But, we have a lot of pride, right? You say, so it's easy to say, well, if I had a patio, I could make it. Well, that's not necessarily true. Because like I said, if I had come out with a certain product on that patio and parking lot when we got it, I actually couldn't have given all my 80 staff members a paycheck because I wouldn't have brought in enough money. So it's not just enough to have a footprint. You actually have to have the strategic ideas and be able to have the skill to implement them to bring in the amount of money to support your staff. And I haven't laid off one person COVID related since March.
That's
right?
pretty amazing.
And that means you actually have to bring in the money, which means you have to align with what people want. So when a chef is not doing that, they're not doing anything wrong. They may be stuck in the quicksand of their own certain situation, which again, everyone's got their own situation. So I'm not saying that I could solve all of it. But I will say that your mind has to say there is always a solution. Always.
Do you feel that when they continue to improve and we're back to some semblance of what normal may be, would you then shift again, or would you continue to apply all these new ideas that you've had and continue to change them up and see how that expands? Or would you default back to some of those other elements pre-COVID that made you successful?
Yeah, I think if you look at any business, as modern as restaurants are, they are very stuck in tradition, the tradition of being singularly focused. And people are funny. Yeah, it's funny because they say restaurants are the hardest business in the world, and that's the reputation, which it is extremely hard, but all business is hard. But I think it's hard. One reason is that because it's pigeonholed into linearly focused, right? And if you want to expand your offerings, that means you have to have 3 different locations of a restaurant. If I want to have a cigar lounge, an oyster bar, an Italian restaurant, and a French-American restaurant, that means I have to have 4 leases in 4 locations. The problem is that dilutes my own skill set. I can only be one place at one time. These things are very high-touch businesses. And so normally that doesn't work out. And the margins are very, very low in a restaurant in the first place. So it's better to maximize the income in one restaurant rather than have 4 restaurants. So, but traditionally, it's always been, well, what kind of restaurant do you have? Oh, it's Italian. Okay. Well, what if it can be 5 different things under one roof? But that's how the restaurants have always been thought of. Now that diversification has been embraced by client, by guests, and by the media, who now understands it's not brand confusion if done well, no other business would go back to being linearly focused, right? And no other business will. You can think of all the, whether it be Amazon or Netflix or anything, they're all going to continue to do what they're doing now that is work and then some. And I think restaurants should do that also. And I, for one, am absolutely going to do that and continue the diversification under one roof to make people understand that actually having multiple offerings, if done well, with a trusting clientele and a product that continues to change and create excitement. Like I tell people, like, look, a movie, the biggest blockbuster movie that come out every year, how long are they're designed to be in the theaters for how long? For a year or 2 weeks, right? If you walk into Star Wars, you'll stand in line the first night. But if you literally wait 2 weeks, you'll walk into the theater, walk right up there, and there'll be no one in the theater, right? Because the excitement they've shot, it's done, right? And it was also the same product. Whereas a restaurant is like a movie that has to run for 10 years with the same movie. That's impossible. It would never happen, right? So in other businesses, like, oh, you have to change your product all the time. Movies change every second, right? But in a restaurant, they say, well, you got to have the same product. You have to be, quote, consistent. That is the recipe for failure. I don't even look for consistency. I look for diversity and change. I change my menu every day because if someone's going to come back, they want to get something new, right? They don't want to see the same old stuff. The vibe is exciting. The vibe is diversified. And to me, that works. That will work in any business. And it should work in restaurant businesses moving forward. When someone comes back and says, why don't you have the duck that you had for me last week? I said, because you're the only one that asked.
Well, that ties into what I was going to ask you, but you pretty much answered it, which was, of all the lessons that you've learned, how have you felt that's applied to other business owners outside the restaurant industry or larger companies for that matter? And you've pretty much highlighted that. It's about constant change. It's about being dynamic. It's about really thinking about speed to market at the end of the day and not really sitting still. So, that all said, how has your definition of career success evolved from your early days to now?
Like I said in the beginning, some of your resume is made by circumstance. But when those circumstances come up, you better be ready. So when the recession came up, I was not ready. And I had 65 people that lost their jobs, plus 14 investors, plus me, that lost an incredible amount of money for a very bad reason. The reason it was actually not the recession, like I said, the reason was me. The reason was I shouldn't have accepted that money because I wasn't ready for the responsibility. And when you have a business, you have taken on a responsibility for the product, for the staff, for the landlord, for the build out, and for everything. You've birthed something that you have a major responsibility for. So career success not just doesn't become that I cook the best chicken or use the most truffles, although truffles are nice. True success is, to me, when I look at my staff, do they feel comfortable knowing that I've created an environment for them that is stable, but stable financially for them, that they can make future plans and they know they're going to get a paycheck. But at the same time, all the things I've said, changing and diversifying and something new every day, so I can stimulate my staff to put in 110% effort when they're in here, right? They earn that paycheck, right? They can't let their guard down for a second. So I can stimulate them without being consistent, right? So that to me is career success. If you can create an environment like that, I think you can say, you know what, I have some skills to build on, and I can teach the people that work for me to have those skills. And one day when they're the boss, I don't have to say, well, it's a lot harder than you think, because that's what my old boss said. My old boss said to me, and he was right. But I actually want my guys to say, when they're the boss, saying, you know what, you prepared me extremely well. And that to me is incredible career success.
You've also learned about the importance of diversification within your career. You've essentially created your own career mashup. So just like you talked about diversification of your own restaurant, the reality is you've had diversification in your career and the skill sets that have been all complementary, and mash them up in such a unique way that has enabled you to expand and innovate in areas that many wouldn't. And it seems like you're also being able to bring that thinking and that skill set to your staff.
You cannot, it is imperative that not only are you not afraid, but you actively embrace, in a sense, I would say murderboarding yourself, right? Put your own skills up there and break them down and really see where you're at when you see the responsibilities that you're taking on, and see if you're faking any of the skills that are necessary, right? Talk to people who have done it and say, look, tell me the real truth. Don't be my friend. Break my skills down. What do you see? That's the only way to build yourself back up. So I try to break myself down literally every day, and then build myself back up with the advice of others that have perspective on it, right? And until they say, you know what, I'm liking what I'm seeing, I keep breaking it down and building it back up. And the funny thing, I don't look forward to tomorrow to say, in a sense, I'm going to build on today, and tomorrow is going to be an even better day. No, I say tomorrow, I'm going to break myself down. Whatever I have today, I'll break it down. I'm going to build it back up. And if you keep doing that, the foundation of your skill set is going to be very strong. And like I said, this is no joke. When you lead anything, I don't care if you have one person on your staff or 80 or 280 or 80,000, you need a multitude of skill sets to achieve the goals that you want to achieve, and you have a responsibility to do so. And restaurants, although they look like they require certain skills, they do require those skills, but there's a million skills behind the scenes that if you don't have them, you will not succeed. And those are not skills, like I said, go outside your own business to learn skills that you can then apply to your own business. That can either restaurant going outside a restaurant because you need business skills, or it can be applied to any other business outside that particular business and back into it.
So finally, what is the best way listeners can connect with you?
The best way right now, Facebook at Jonathan Krinn, Jonathan Krinn, Krinn. Instagram at Chef Jon Krinn. That's Chef and then Jonkrinn. My email, by email, if they have specific questions, I'm always happy to ask. Another thing Booz Allen taught me is to actually be able to function with a laptop. So I'm pretty on top of that. That's Jon at clarityviena.com. And I think those are always reach out to me with any questions. I do get a lot of them from all people from all walks of life.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show and sharing your incredible story and the really insightful ways that you've been very innovative in the restaurant industry, but just thinking about business in general and taking an uncontrollable situation and making it controllable to create that compelling momentum.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been an honor.
What I loved about Jon's story was how he totally thought outside the box in terms of his own personal development, his approach to innovation, and speed to market for his restaurant. These perspectives and insights provide valuable lessons that any business owner, or really anyone, can apply to survive and thrive. And while not everyone may have the means to adapt the way Jon has, in Jon's case, it's been strategic planning and mindset over goods and materials that have led to successful shifts of his entire operation. His growth mindset helped him to develop and apply those new skills he learned, which led to creating that beneficial mashup for himself and his restaurant. What his story also reflects are the many lessons we've learned from our other guests, like digging the well before you're thirsty. As Jordan Harbinger reminded us, you need to invest in those customer relationships from day one, because you never know when you'll need to fall back on your loyal fan base. And another important reminder is about creating an environment where it's safe to fail. As Rick Lindquist advised us, Jon learned from the first economic recession that moving forward, he'd need to have a plan for safe experimentation, which started with lowering the barrier to entry early on and creating a culture of testing, learning, and experimentation within his restaurant from the onset. And ultimately, what helped the most was truly listening to and understanding his customers, as fundamentally, they hold the keys to business success. Like Mark Angelos told us in the last episode, you don't get to decide what's valuable to your customers, but you do have to do your research to learn what it is and deliver it. Thanks for listening to Strategic Momentum. To connect with Jon, you can reach him on Facebook at Jonathan Krinn. That's JonathanKrinn. Or on Instagram at Chef Jon Krinn, or by email at john@clarityvienna.com. If you've liked what you heard, please share this podcast with friends and colleagues. And of course, we always appreciate ratings and reviews. To get show notes, links, and more tips and advice from this episode, you can visit us at strategicmomentum.co. There, you can contribute your own tips and help add to the great work and career advice we've collected over the years. Don't forget to follow Strategic Momentum on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Instagram. You could also join the Facebook community by searching Strategic Momentum in groups. I'm Connie Steele, and you've been listening to the Strategic Momentum Podcast.